This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
UFOs, ghosts, ancient civilizations, the supernatural.
I know about security, and you don't lie if you can help it, but you be evasive.
We may never know the truth about what's really going on, but it sure is fun to speculate.
This is a new edit of the very first interview I ever did before I even had a show. All I had was my Facebook page. And the very first interview got to be one of my heroes, Stanton Friedman. Great man, humorous. He's been around for a long time. He admits himself that you try not to lie, but you be evasive and stuff like that. And there's times you catch him being evasive. He believes in UFOs and all that other stuff, but he doesn't think that we should have access necessarily to any of the tech. But anyway, it was very cool getting to talk to him, because watching his videos really helped me to wake up about a lot of things, even about some of the things he may be lying about. So here it is, my very first interview.
All right, I am Steve Crawford. If you are in the UFO world at all, and you are a sci-fi buff like I am, you have heard of this man. Stanton Friedman, thank you so much for taking my call. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fine here in the snowfall in Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Fantastic. Yeah, not too many people know you're a Canadian resident.
Well, I'm a Canadian citizen as well as an American citizen. I can complain about both governments legally.
Well, that's fantastic. That's mainly why I got you on here, too. So for the people who don't know who you are, why don't you give us a quick little explanation of who you are and why they should listen to you?
Okay, well, I grew up in New Jersey. It wasn't my fault, but I got bachelor's and master's degrees in physics at the University of Chicago in the mid-'50s. Carl Sagan and I were classmates for 3 years.
I heard that.
I worked in industry then for 12 years on exciting, definitely classified, eventually canceled advanced technology programs. Nuclear airplanes for General Electric, fission rockets for Westinghouse, compact nuclear systems for General Nucleonics.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the switch to being a full-time ufologist when I thought I was going out west to take the most exciting job I'd ever heard of. I was supposed to figure out how flying saucers work for McDonnell Douglas in Santa Monica. And wow, that would have been great. I'd already given a couple hundred lectures, As I was driving across the country, it turned out that the program that was supporting that work was canceled. Nice to walk into the employment office and they say, you realize we just laid off 5,000 people.
Oh, no.
So they kept me on for 3 months, and I had a short job with TRW Systems working on the Pioneer spacecraft, tiny little nuclear systems. And then I realized I'd have to look out for my family, and I worked hard to get lectures, and that was 1970 or so. Here I am. I've given over 700 lectures in all 10 provinces, all 50 states, 18 other countries, written 5 books, answered, I figured once, 60,000 questions at the end of my lectures and on radio and television programs. I bring to bear my peculiar background. First of all, one of the biggest objections from what I call the nasty, noisy negativists is you can't get here from there, Stan. And I point out that I worked on nuclear airplanes, fission rockets, did a study of fusion rockets. You can get here from there, not easily, not cheaply, and most of the ancient academics that I have to contend with have no idea that these programs went on, and they weren't small. The Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department at General Electric in 1958 spent $100 million, employed 3,500 people, 1,100 of them were engineers and scientists.
Wow.
That's $100 million is a lot of money in 1958.
And that was a canceled program.
That was canceled, yeah. Wow. We didn't operate a nuclear-powered airplane. Now, at Westinghouse, we had successful operation of a nuclear rocket reactor propulsion system on the ground.
Very cool.
And then they canceled the program after that. It was a small one, only 1,100 megawatts, which is half the power of Grand Coulee Dam. Los Alamos operated one 4,400 megawatts, twice the power of Grand Coulee Dam, less than 8 feet in diameter. But they canceled the program. Another thing I bring to bear is that I worked under security for, it was 14 years, not 12 years. And many people don't seem to understand how security works. Mm-hmm. I'm currently looking into the Operation Majestic 12 documents, and people think, well, those people who supposedly were on it, surely they would have talked to their wives. And I say, no way, Jose. I never told my wife anything classified.
Exactly.
I mean, I've been to 20 archives. I'm a bloodhound. I go after facts and data. Mm-hmm. I go by a rule I learned in the 5th grade when a teacher said something wrong in a science class, and I piped up, and she gave me a hard time, so I brought in the encyclopedia I just read the day before. But the basic rule is have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear.
Exactly. I was going to say, you're not just giving lectures, you're presenting facts. That's all there is to it, and saying this is why it is completely plausible.
Well, yeah, and also I try to raise the objections of the debunkers and demolish them rather than ignore them.
I know, and it's really fun to watch you do that.
Well, I've done debates, including Oxford University Debating Society, and we won, got 60% of the vote, and that felt good. Mm-hmm. I also have debated on Coast to Coast Radio. Dr. Seth Shostak of the SETI organization. I tell people SETI, S-E-T-I, stands for Silly Effort to Investigate, not for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, because it's based on a bunch of unscientific assumptions.
Well, and old technology, how could we possibly assume that anyone that may be as far as a million years more advanced than us would still be operating on radio waves?
That's a very good question. I don't use, there's a lot of old technology we don't use anymore.
And yet we're still doing searches with them.
Well, no, I mean, I don't use a slide rule anymore. I did use those when I started work in industry, and I had a whole class that I was talking to at a university in Michigan when I mentioned that when I started work, I was using a slide rule and looked around, no reaction. Any of you know what a slide rule is? Not one person! Oh, did I feel old? Well, it's very important to recognize that technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future is not an extrapolation of the past.
Exactly.
You have to change how you do things. And we don't like to admit that, maybe, but that's what's going on. I don't use a slide rule. today's computers are much more improved over the ones I started using years and years ago. A laser isn't a better light bulb. It's entirely different physics.
Exactly.
And one of the things that's irksome is how astronomers who don't know anything about it, developing advanced technology, that goes on in industry and in national labs, not at universities, for goodness sakes.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem to understand that people can keep secrets, that advanced technology is being worked at in very large programs. Well, as a good example of that, I've had people tell me, Stan, look, you say there was a saucer crash at Roswell, and I do. I was the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident.
Mm-hmm.
But, Stan, if that had happened, they'd have had to pull half the physicists out of college campuses to work on that. And I laughed and said, you've got to be kidding.
Exactly.
Are you really unaware of Los Alamos and Sandia and Livermore? And a whole bunch of other national labs, thousands of employees with security clearances, mind you.
And people think we're just making this up. That's the silly thing. We had, and the people that I talk to, I hear a lot of, it's or Venus refracting alpha swamp gas. Now let's get into J. Allen Hynek for a minute, because he was the one who came up with that theory originally, was he not?
Well, Alan was the chairman of the astronomy department at Northwestern University, and for 20 years he was the scientific consultant to the Air Force Project Blue Book, which lasted from the early 50s until 1969.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens there was a big fuss about sightings up in Michigan, and he came up with an explanation. The Air Force was pressuring him. We got to say something. People are giving us a hard time. Well, he said one possible explanation for some of these cases is swamp gas. And that went over like a lead balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And there were over 100 cartoons done in his honor across the country.
Now, at that point, he hadn't even looked at a UFO case, right?
Well, he had looked at a UFO case. He was a consultant for many years.
Wow.
Now, he wasn't into technology. I could never get him to look at all the work on interstellar travel. Most astronomers aren't.
Mm-hmm.
They're still stuck with chemical rockets, which is about as useful as saying that, how long does it take to go around the planet? Well, it took Magellan 3 years, a ship. He didn't make it. That's a good standard. Well, the space station does it in 90 minutes.
Yep.
It doesn't use big sails. So I try to get people to understand. Well, I just had a critic yesterday saying, well, how come there aren't any sightings by astronomers? They walk around with telescopes and they're looking at the skies. Utterly ridiculous comment, because there are sightings by astronomers. They're recorded in Alan's book, The UFO Experience, in a book by a professor from Stanford University, Peter, whatever his name is. I'll come up with it in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting old. Anyway, he had a bunch of them. He surveyed. Dr. James E. McDonald, in his testimony before Congress, had a number of sightings by astronomers.
Mm-hmm.
This was Dr. Peter Sturrock, whose name I was looking for.
Well, and wouldn't we also have to assume that a lot of these places would be government-controlled? And the government's not going to just let people, you would have to report it to the government first, correct? I would assume.
Well, the people, what's happened is there's been a climate of ridicule created by the nasty, noisy negativists.
Yeah.
And when I check my audiences, at the end of my lectures, I frequently ask how many people here believe they've seen what I would consider to be a flying saucer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I prefer the term flying saucer because all flying saucers are UFOs. Only a few UFOs are flying saucers. I try to put the facts out on the table for people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk about 5 large-scale scientific studies, I ask my audiences how many people have read this, and typically it's fewer than 2% have read any of them. Well, what I started to say about polling my audience after the lecture,
right?
Typically 10% of the hands will go up when I ask how many people have seen something.
Mm-hmm.
And to the surprise, they start off just barely over their heads. This is after hearing me lecture.
Yeah.
And as I move across the hall, the hands go up higher and firmer because suddenly people realize they're not the only ones.
Exactly.
Typically 10%. But then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down.
Yeah.
Now, if there's anybody left, I ask another question. How many of you were in the military at the time? There's still some hands up. I will say, you want to tell us about it? One guy in Texas at a university said, I can't. They told me not to say anything. Great line.
And people
Another
don't
guy
get
said, they
that.
took my pictures. And that's all he said.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm not asking your name. You don't need to stand up, but I'm sure the audience would like to hear the rest of the story. And he told about flying a four-engine airplane, Air Force plane, out over the Pacific. Plane ahead, radios back, saucer heading your way. They had gun cameras. They took pictures. They reported, they called the base to which they were flying, radioed, and told them they were bringing in film. The crew doesn't handle the film. That's intelligence stuff. And they landed, gave up the film, and they were debriefed and told never to say anything. And, it's strange because I just did a paper for the Mutual UFO Network about press coverage of the subject, which is, from pretty lousy most of the time. And three of the people that have given a bad name to UFOs are science fiction writers: Isaac Asimov, Ben Bova, and Arthur C. Clarke.
Yep. Yeah.
And they've all said dumb things, and I don't hesitate to say that. Look, Isaac Asimov was a great writer. I would never say that he wasn't. But he said they will either, if we're coming here, they'd either stay hidden or they'd land and make themselves known. If they do neither, they're not alien spacecraft. Like, he's an expert on alien behavior.
Yeah.
And the thing people don't seem to understand, we live on a planet on which $1 trillion will be spent this year on things military.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that means we're not very nice guys, but it also means that anybody flying here is in trouble because anybody down here would like to grab himself a flying saucer so we could duplicate the technology and use it in warfare.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're all about. And I don't know what the young generation learns, but we should be reinforced in our knowledge that 50 million people died in World War II on this planet because of the war.
Yeah.
50 million. 1,700 cities were destroyed. We're a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare.
Yeah.
And anybody, why don't they land on the White House lawn? It's a no-fly zone.
Well, there's those theories that we're quarantined, that they're making sure we don't leave this planet until we're ready. And
I agree.
Have you personally seen anything?
No, I've never seen a flying saucer. Look, I spent 14 years chasing neutrons and gamma rays. Never saw one.
Yeah.
They're real
and
too.
Yet you still believe, because it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Exactly. That's my point. That's what I try to get across to people. You don't, just because you don't believe the truth doesn't mean it ceases to exist. You don't have to see something for it. How many people believe in God? They haven't seen him, but they believe. I mean, come on.
That's right. That's right. And, courts of law, preponderance of the evidence, rarely beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, if I told you I saw a 747 fly over my house, you say, well, I don't believe you. You got to show me a motion picture.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We take people's word. The reason most sightings can be explained as relatively conventional phenomena seen under perhaps unusual circumstances is that people are good observers.
Mm-hmm.
We know it was Venus because they were pointing in the right direction. They had the time right. They described its behavior properly. It was Venus. They didn't know it was Venus, but a dispassionate observer will say, yeah, good witness. It's not like if you're describing a bank robber and you say he was 6 feet plus or minus 20%.
Yeah.
You got to do better than that if you're trying to separate one person out.
Well, and people get arrested and put away with less evidence these days than there is to support the claims of UFOs' existence, And so, I mean, they can't say, not enough evidence. Well, if you're willing to believe a tabloid story just because it was shown on TV once, then why would you not believe stuff that has evidence? I mean, it's insane.
We're not taught how to look at evidence. So listen to the story and how good does it sound? That's what matters.
Exactly. We want to be told stories. We want to be lulled. And when nobody wants to think that there's somebody out there that could squash us like bugs if they chose to, and I can understand that, but, hiding from it isn't going to make it disappear. We should be embracing it, and everybody on this planet should have access to this information. Could you imagine? We would be living, if people took Nikola Tesla and put him on a pedestal instead of Edison, we would be living a Star Trek life now. I'd like to mention a couple of names, and you tell me what you know about them, if you know about them, or what you think about them, and their stories. One would be Bill Cooper.
Bill Cooper was a liar and a cheat and died a suitable death. I don't say that by many people. He shootout with sheriff's authorities. And he claimed in his book, Behold the Pale Horse, that a research grant that I had from the Fund for UFO Research, well, it was really CIA money, and Stan works for the CIA. And that's total malarkey.
I think you'd be living a lot better if you did.
I did want to work for the government. I delivered mail for the U.S. Post Office for 2 weeks in 1952 as a student at Rutgers University.
Okay, so we won't go too much more about Bill because he is gone now, but so that's okay. Gary McKinnon.
Well, I admire his guts. He's the guy who dug into the hacking files
from the UK, correct?
Yeah, and good for the UK government in not letting him come over here. Forwarding him and saying,
I hear he suffers from autism or something as well.
Yes, he does. And so I admire his guts in speaking out. I was surprised he got in as far as he did, although I guess yesterday there was a big hacking story about Sony, and apparently the biggest hacking story there's ever been about somebody getting into somebody else's files. But I have a secret admiration for Gary, let's put it that way.
Do you believe what he found or what he alleges he found is plausible?
I'll give it a maybe.
Considering you do believe Roswell happened, and if it did, then logically, if they were able to deduce some of this technology, would they or would they not, want to be secure in case they did know of an impending threat, or even just building bases on the moon for safety reasons?
Security is a way of life. Look, the Washington Post last year said that the total black budget that is not under direct congressional control for military intelligence work was $52.6 billion.
Wow.
That's an awful lot of money. That's NSA, CIA, and NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, for most of it, more than 80% or so. So, of course you cover up stuff. That's what happens. That's their duty. And people who think, it comes out quick sooner or later, mostly later. A good example of that, we had broken the German codes in the early part of World War II, and it was of enormous importance to know
That's
where
right, they recovered a decoder and fixed it. That's right, I remember that.
And you'd think that, and we had to distribute the information very carefully because if the Germans found out we'd broken their code, they'd change it, and that would give us a very tough time. Well, as it happens, there was no public word about the fact that Project Ultra had been successful until 25 years after the war.
Yeah.
And our first spy satellite, the Corona spy satellite, which just happens to be the small town nearest to where the Roswell event took place, small world, went up after 13 failures, 12 failures. The 13th one was successful. Got more data about Soviet technology, rocket launching facilities, and all that sort of stuff, than all the U-2 flights which preceded it. We didn't go public with that. The Russians knew we were flying it until almost 30 years afterward. You keep secrets. Because
and there was good reason back then, but, things are different now. Well, they would be different now, but it's almost like they're trying to keep a perpetual war going so they can continue with the secrets. That's my opinion, but
that might well be. People, want to continue. It's Newton's law. People in motion want to continue in motion unless a force is exerted to change it. And people who, the constant Cold War, for example, people don't realize how important that was and how much money went into sometimes crazy ideas. But it was always on the basis, one up the Russians, because at the beginning, we underestimated their capability. General Groves, who headed the Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb, was asked in 1948 how long it would take before the Russians had a bomb. And he said, well, they were devastated by the war and so forth. It'll take them at least 8 years, and they don't even have a means for delivering it. They don't have an air force of their own planes. Mm-hmm. Their first Russian atomic bomb was the next year, 1949. And their delivery system, the United States had left the B-29 over there during the war, mm-hmm. and they built a bunch more of them, upgraded it a bit, but and all of a sudden, in a secret meeting of the National Security Council, it was stated in 1951 the Russians had made more progress in the development of nuclear weapons and methods for delivering them in the past 18 months than had been expected for 5 years from now. And that scared the heck out of those people in Washington, believe me.
No, I guess it would.
And so, the world was a different sort of place, but and people ask me, why the secrecy? The fear of panic? I don't think that's it.
I'm sure in some small part, it's definitely not the main reason.
Well, in the back of everybody's head, you worry about what the impact will be. But first rule is you want to figure out how the darn things work. They make wonderful weapons delivery and defense systems. Mm-hmm. You got Roswell wreckage. You set up your secret project. And you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies.
Exactly.
We tend to forget that. They read the newspapers too.
Yeah.
And so secrecy is just a big part of the picture, and will continue to be. And also, there is a little question. People say, Stan, don't you think we're entitled to know everything? And I say, no, there's a national security aspect. What do you mean? Look, if we were to put our knowledge that we have gained from studying crash flying saucers and flying saucers out on the table, you think the Russians and Chinese would put theirs out too? If they don't, why should we put ours out?
Yeah.
They could use what we've learned and what they've learned, and maybe they wind up ahead of us.
Yeah, they've released files, but not technology.
Well, there's a difference between saying, yes, the planet's being visited, and we're having international meetings at which we will look at the psychological and religious and economic philosophical aspects of that, and putting everything out on the table. I worked on security for 14 years, so I'm conscious of that. It matters.
Yeah, you're not just making this up.
Yes.
Okay.
Those do sink ships.
They really do. Okay. How about Billy Meyer?
Well, I knew Wendell Stevens, and I found that he wasn't telling the truth a good deal of the time. And so I have not accepted the Billy Meyer story as being legitimate. He's the guy who claims a lot of interactions with aliens in Switzerland and took pictures, of a tree that isn't there when people go to look for it and stuff like that.
And claimed something about they went back in time and moved it or something like that.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. Very imaginative.
So you don't think those pictures, at least, are anything?
No.
They're probably fake.
Yeah.
At least in your opinion. Okay, now here's one you probably may not know about because it's not specifically UFO, but I'm sure you've heard of it being in the circles you're in. How about Andrew Basiago? Time travel.
I've read some of his stuff about Serpo. We've got a base on Mars.
Jump room.
The last one I heard was that Obama had been one of the people who went up there, and it didn't take any time out of their life because they were pushed forward and then back in time. Mm-hmm. And I am very dubious. I even wrote a column. I do a monthly column for the MUFON Journal about the Serpo story. Mm-hmm. And, there have been imaginative science fiction writers for generations.
Be evasive.
But that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
Mm-hmm. But I think at this point, nobody can debunk him. I think he found himself a little niche, so he doesn't really have to. He's like, well, I can't prove it, but you can't disprove it.
Well, that's the onus should be on him to make a claim, establish it. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me, well, if you can't disprove it, that means it's true. That's false logic.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, and one more. How about Nick Pope?
I know Nick. I consider him a friend. I think, he's gone a little political, and I think he's gone overboard in his attacks on one of the guys who was one of the first off the starter point on the Rendlesham case.
Right.
but he's a pretty solid guy, even if he does get off once in a while.
And Nick's from the UK. He used to be with the Ministry of Defense there, for people who don't know.
Yeah, he lives in the States now, incidentally.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the very few people who can say he was paid to investigate UFO reports.
Mm-hmm.
He was the UFO desk at the Ministry of Defense.
That is very cool. Okay, Stanton, I'm not going to take up any more of your time because I have more interviews to do as well.
Don't forget www.StantonFriedman.com. Find out about my book.
Exactly. Buy a book. You're going to love it. This guy's fantastic. See you soon, Stanton. You have a great night.
Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye.
Conspiracy Factor Theory.
Barry Fitzgerald, have you ever heard of the show Ghost Hunters?
Yeah, I've heard of the show.
He wants to know, why do you think aliens are here?
Well, in one of my books, I talk about 20 reasons for coming here, but I think, they're graduate students doing their thesis research on the development of a primitive society. They're radio broadcasters with the weekly show, Idiocy in the Boondocks. They're stealing our heavy minerals. The Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. That means a cubic foot of Earth weighs more than a cubic foot of any of the other planets. That means there are more heavy metals, which are rare in the universe.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Some have weird properties, like uranium 100 years ago was used for a yellow coloring agent for tableware. That's illegal now, of course.
Yeah.
But I think the primary reason is to quarantine us.
Right.
We're a primitive society whose major activity is obviously tribal warfare. World War II, we killed 50 million of our own kind.
Yeah, that's just
people.
Insane.
We destroyed 1,700 cities. We have exploded. People think we've only exploded, the bombs on Japan, nuclear weapons. We've exploded a total of 2,000 nuclear weapons, even though only 2 of them on people.
Right. The rest were just tests, right?
Tests, yeah. Some of them were even underground. What do you know? We have joined the nuclear club. That is, we know, as all the advanced civilizations do, that the primary source of energy in the universe is nuclear fusion in the stars.
Right.
That's what drives the sun. We didn't know that until the late 30s. I worked on a study in 1962 of use of nuclear fusion for deep space travel. It was for the Air Force, as a matter of fact. You can kick particles out the back end of a fusion rocket that will have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. There's a little money involved. If you want to go, you got to put out the dough. That's the way it is. So don't be misled by the fact that we haven't done it yet.
Do you think that maybe that, I can't remember the name of the particle, but it's basically the God particle. Do you think that could help out in as far as propulsion?
Not that I know of. Fusion we know something about. We have exploded. Well, to give you an example of the difference it makes if you go nuclear, a big bomb in 1944, the year before the war ended, was a 10-ton blockbuster. It released the energy of 10 tons of dynamite, made a big hole in the ground, too. Now, our first atomic bomb, the next year, 45, released the energy of about 15,000 tons of dynamite.
That's insane.
The first H-bomb released the energy of 10 million tons of TNT, and the Russian set one off that was 50 million tons of TNT.
Did they have any clue of what it might do to our atmosphere and our air and our water?
Well, it made a mess in a place in Siberia. Who cares? What can I say?
Yeah. Okay, now let's see.
What I'm saying is, from an alien viewpoint, though, all these nuclear weapons leave radioactive materials in the atmosphere. They can very quickly see what kind of a civilization we have.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the total military budget this past year was $1 trillion. This is for planet Earth.
Right.
And 20,000 kids died of starvation yesterday,
mm-hmm.
and the day before, and the day before that. So we're not nice guys.
Kind of like the bad guys now with the kind of weapons, the primitive but deadly weapons we're coming up with. So that makes total sense to me as well.
And they don't want to be surprise attacked by us,
exactly.
As you can imagine.
Okay, now that kind of brings up another one about what do you think about teleportation?
Well, it would be nice if I knew how to do it, but I don't know how to do it. I know about security, and you don't lie if you can help it, but you be evasive. So,
do you think that there are people tinkering with it at least?
Well, the Russians did experiments in a lab with moving stuff around with mines back in the late 40s.
Right, right.
So that's not the same as moving people a long distance at a high speed.
No, but it's still along that lines. Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Is there any footage or pictures that you have seen that you are flat out convinced this is real?
Oh, sure. I use them, and I don't mean lights in the sky. I don't know what the heck to do with them. Right. The McMinnville, Oregon photograph, Paul Trent's from the 1950s. As a matter of fact, they have an annual festival, and I'll be there in May. These are all listed on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, events. 2 pictures there. Dr. Bruce Maccabee published articles in scientific journals about those.
Right.
And they're legitimate. The Santa Ana, California Rex Heflin photo is legitimate. There are a number of items that will do okay. Obviously, we don't have the pictures taken by gun cameras on board airplanes,
right?
Which would be much better. When you get close to your subject, when you take a picture, you get a bigger picture.
Right, exactly.
So, there are pictures, but I should point out that contrary to people's expectation, your typical digital camera isn't a great scientific tool. The resolution is not very good.
No.
I mean, if you get 40 megapixels, you're getting better, but most are 10, 12, 15,
Mm-hmm.
So, and also, the moon in the sky can be covered by an aspirin tablet held at arm's length. Be evasive. That's not very big.
No.
And yet we think of it as being quite large when we see it. Wow. When I ask people, usually was what they saw as big as the moon. Usually it's no. So that's a small chunk of the sky.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, now I got a friend named Lincoln Levere, who's a local boy that now lives in Tombstone, Arizona. He's an actor. He was in The Postman with Kevin Costner and such. And he'd like to know, if you could go back in time knowing what you know now, would you do anything different, and would you try to get yourself a souvenir?
Well, I never saw a UFO, so I don't know how to get myself a souvenir.
Oh, even just with people you talked to that said they may have had one. Well, remember, you'd have hindsight now, so you'd know where to go to get these souvenirs.
Well, look, I worked under security for 14 years. The government knows how to keep secrets, be evasive. And big ones and small ones. I mean, I'll give you an example. The Brits broke the German military communications code. In World War II, there were 12,000 people working in Bletchley Park, a small English community, and their job was to intercept, decode, translate, and very carefully deliver appropriate materials to appropriate people with an appropriate need to know. Well, if the Germans found out we'd broken the code, they'd have changed it, you see, and we couldn't afford that because it was so extraordinarily important to saving lives. And as a matter of fact, we were able to, we fooled Hitler with disinformation, convincing him that the invasion of Europe, which everybody knew was coming, would be at Calais instead of at Normandy.
I remember seeing that. Didn't they have, they made like inflatable, like fake tanks and stuff?
Oh, they did all kinds of stuff. And they sent messages and stuff. And the point is, when the German generals said, bring in the reserves, Hitler said, no, that's not where the attack's going to stay. That's just a feint, F-E-I-N-T, and they're coming at Calais.
Right.
And he delayed, and thank goodness he did. But the fact that the German codes and also the Japanese codes had been broken was not made public just at the end of the war, but for 25 years later.
Wow.
It was kept secret, even though 12,000 people knew about it right at Bletchley Park. And I should stress, an important thing about security is need to know. Not all generals, for example, during the war got access to the super secret German communication.
Exactly. There were actually some majors and such that knew things the generals didn't.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it had nothing to do with rank. It was need to know.
Yeah.
And, I get people telling me that the guys who worked on Majestic 12 would have certainly told their wives what they were doing. That's nonsense. I never told my wife anything classified.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, it's a good example of that. The man who was in charge of the Manhattan Project to build nuclear weapons in the United States during World War II, General Leslie Groves, his wife got a call on August 6, 1945, from somebody in his office at the Pentagon, telling her he thought she would be interested in listening to the news today at noon. She turns on the radio, no television back then, and they announced the bombing of Hiroshima. This incredible new weapon, and that the war would probably be over soon. And she thought the officer from her husband's office told her about it because their son was due to be sent to the Pacific.
Right.
The last sentence of the program was this project to develop these incredible nuclear weapons was done under the direction of General Leslie Groves. That's when she found out what her husband had been doing for the previous 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And he did a lot of traveling, met with all kinds of people. He didn't tell her anything. Well, I say that only to illustrate, as part of the Manhattan Project, we're not talking just a few bucks here and there. To separate uranium isotopes, uranium-235 is nicely used in a nuclear weapon. U-238 is a pain in the butt. There's 0.7% U-235, so you got to enrich the uranium. How do you do that? Well, our solution was to build a plant, a gaseous diffusion plant, that was 1 mile long. It had sheets of nickel through which you pumped uranium hexafluoride gas, and you keep running it through. The lighter isotope moves a little quicker, and we were using, at that facility, 5% of all the electricity produced in the United States.
Holy cow.
In secret. That's why it was at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, because TVA had dams and was producing lots of electrical power. But it was all done in secret, and many of the people working on the project had no idea what they were working on.
Right.
So secrets can be kept.
Since we're talking about these kind of experiments, what's your thoughts about the Philadelphia experiment?
A total baloney.
Yeah, okay.
And sell it from a delicatessen. Secrets can be kept.
It is a pretty fantastic story. I'd love for it to be true. I mean, aside from what the soldiers went through if it did.
Yeah, we did a lot of checking on that many years ago, and there were a lot of liars. Even today, there's plenty of phony baloney stuff that gets spread all the time. I see it on television from time to time,
right.
as if it were true.
Okay, so since we're talking about that, Jim Mount from Toronto would like to know, do you believe Bob Lazar's story?
Maybe he knows that I don't, but when I first heard about that, because the claim was that Bob was a nuclear physicist, so people kept asking me about him, because I'm a nuclear physicist. And so I started to try to check. In particular, Bob said he had a master's degree in physics from the MIT and another one in electronics from Caltech. Mm-hmm. Now, those are the two top technical scientific institutions in the country, certainly among the best in the world.
Right.
And so I checked with 5 different people at MIT. They never heard of him. The same happened at Caltech. And I talked to Bob's high school. He finished in the bottom third of his high school class. Wow. He never would have been accepted at MIT. I got a call from his buddy asking what would it take to convince me. I said, how about copies of his diplomas? And several other things like that, listings and directories of, if you get a degree from MIT, you don't throw it away.
Right.
I was accepted there. I couldn't afford to go. Tuition was $950 a year. Now it's $27,000 something.
I know. Wow, eh?
So the answer, and also he claimed that Los Alamos had 500 pounds of element 115. Wow.
Right.
In the first place, it's got a short half-life, less than 2 minutes, so there's no way you can accumulate 500 pounds of it. In the second place, yes, it's real, and we anticipated. We ran that big accelerator. There was a joint program with the Soviets, and we found 4 atoms of the stuff, which is exciting from a physics viewpoint, but you need 10 followed by 23 zeros, more atoms than that to do anything.
Right, okay.
So it sounds good, but it ain't true.
Billy Lawton from Romford, Maine wants to know, do you believe disclosure will happen soon, and what do you think it'll take to make everyone believe?
Well, most people already accept reality. The problem is that most people think most other people don't, so they're afraid to talk about it. When I, at the end of my lectures, ask how many people believe that they have seen what I would consider to be a flying saucer, the polls show that, and I've had classrooms where 80% thought most people didn't believe in UFOs, and 80% of those kids did. And when I ask about the sightings, 10% raised their hand. When I asked how many of you reported what you saw, 90% put their hands down.
Yeah. Okay, Stan Lee from Houston, Texas. I don't know if it's the Stan Lee or not, but he wants to know, I found this pretty funny, and we can actually put a spin on it. Are humans real?
Well, real what? Not very intelligent, I'd say.
Well, the spin I would like to put on that be like, there's a lot of theories out there that at some point our natural evolution was interrupted, and they think that UFOs and aliens may have come down and spliced our DNA.
Well, I'm not saying we're not somebody's colony. Maybe a penal colony. They dumped all the bad boys and girls here, and that's why we're so nasty to each other.
I think it's a combination, penal colony, and we're a TV show for them, yes. All right, if you could sit at a table with anyone living or dead and talk about UFOs and physics, who would it be?
Oh, boy. The first names that come to mind are people who are dead, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably not Stephen Hawking.
No.
And not many of the ancient academics and fossilized physicists of the world seem to feel that they can express an opinion without doing any homework at all. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up.
Yeah.
Well, for example, Dr. Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, head of the Hayden Planetarium in New York, he was the one who redid the Cosmos series.
Right, that's right. I just
when he spoke at Penn State University, he said, the proof that governments can't keep secrets is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia. Now, there's a clever remark. You know, he doesn't know anything about security, obviously.
Yeah. Did you ever get the chance to talk to any of the astronauts like Edgar Mitchell?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have. I've talked to, Dr. Edgar Mitchell wrote the foreword for my book, Flying Saucers and Science.
Right.
He was the sixth man to walk on the moon. So.
Yeah, and he's from Roswell, correct?
Well, he lived there growing up. Also, an astronaut on the first craft that went around the moon but didn't land. He and I were each chairing a session at a meeting of the American Nuclear Society, and we had known each other before that, and we spent 2 hours talking about UFOs, and he bought copies of everything I had with me. I was giving a lecture on the way home from there. I was working for Westinghouse. And I asked him about the astronauts' sightings, because I'd heard about them, and, well, he didn't think there was anything that couldn't be explained after investigation. But he said it in such a way that I really thought that I had hit a security wall, and I wasn't going to push it. Be evasive. Well, you know, I know about security, and you don't lie if you can help it, but you be evasive, I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to a couple of other astronauts. One was at the congressional hearings in 1978. He gave testimony about a sighting he'd had when he was a pilot in Europe in the 50s. Wow. The astronauts are definitely interested. I've spoken at NASA Houston. Very good response. So, look, I've spoken to engineering societies, management clubs for people like Lockheed and McDonnell Douglas and stuff like that. They're all interested. You know, it's weird that people think that these people don't care.
What do you think of ancient alien theory?
Well, it depends on how you define it. Do I think that there have been past visitations? Yes, of course. Anybody who wants to read some good examples of that, look at Dr. Barry Downing's book on flying saucers in the Bible.
Right.
He goes through the Old and New Testaments and finds many examples. I mean, of course, they didn't use saucers back then, only cups or mugs. But
fire and stuff like that was what they would call them, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, Ezekiel's wheel, the pillar of fire by night, the cloud by day. There are a whole bunch of these. And, of course, there's all that Renaissance artwork with things in the sky, and you say, where the heck what's that doing there? You know?
What do you think about the Bermuda Triangle? Do you think that's a legitimate phenomenon?
There are ships that go down and planes that go down in that region of the water. Of course, this is true in many other places.
Right.
Secrets can be kept. And what we know is that there are an awful lot of people who go out on boats who aren't well prepared. They have a shell oil road map from Florida, and take their boat out. And the weather is subject to rapid changes in that area. Be evasive and may well be responsible for all kinds of crazy things happening. So, sightings occur all over the world. I'm more concerned about between 1951 and 56, 200 American military planes had fatal crashes.
Right.
And 5 of the pilots had over 100 missions in Korea where they had to be pretty good pilots because there were MiGs trying to shoot them down.
Mm-hmm.
They come back to the United States where there weren't any MiGs, and they crash. And New York Times used words like disintegrated and disappeared.
Wow.
And I have, on 7 different occasions, had people come up to me quietly after my lectures and tell me that they were stationed at a certain base where a pilot was scrambled to chase a UFO and never came back. If I've heard 7 stories, I got to be a lot more than that. Well, orders were actually issued in 1952. Shoot them down if they don't land when instructed to do so. You can see a lot of good cartoons with that.
Yeah. Okay, and do you think that Germany had any crashes that Hitler may have been able to get his hands on?
I don't think so.
No, I would think not either, because a lot of
he would have used it if he could figure out how they work.
You would think he would have used it, yeah.
Well, he was such a nice guy, he didn't want to hurt anybody.
A couple of names. There was actually, the last time I talked to you, I had brought up Nick Pope, and you had mentioned that he's a nice guy, but you don't like the way he's a little hard on one of the guys from the Rendlesham case. Could you get into that a little bit more about Rendlesham and what you were? Who is it you think he's picking on?
The guy, I'm picturing him in my mind, and the name isn't coming, but it'll come. He wrote a book with Larry Warren, Left at Eastgate, and he's from New York State. And Nick and he have differences of opinion, let's put it that way. They each have competing books.
Right, okay.
And Nick's a sharp guy. He worked for the Ministry of Defense in England, their UFO desk for like 3 years. And the problem you get into is that, judging by the United States anyway, most of the people involved in like Project Blue Book, which was supposedly the American establishment to deal with UFOs, when it was closed, that ended everything. Mm-hmm. That sounds good, but you get Blue Book files, there's nothing above secret in them. And then we finally got a memo from the man whose memo closed Project Blue Book. General Carol Bolender wrote the memo in October 1968. 69, I'm sorry. It was because of the University of Colorado study done, the Condon report at University of Colorado.
Right.
They recommended the Blue Book be closed because it wasn't contributing anything to intelligence or the military, which is true, frankly. Anyway, General Bolender, who was an engineer working on the Lunar Excursion Module program, was asked what should we do about Project Blue Book? So he wrote a memo, which we didn't see until 10 years later, in which he said that, moreover, reports of UFOs which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP, Joint Army Navy Air Force Publication 146, or Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system, which is an extraordinary statement. 2 paragraphs later, he said in this memo that if we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have a place to report UFO sightings. However, as already noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the procedures set up for that purpose. Again, an extraordinary claim. Now, we got this 10 years later. I managed to locate General Bolender. I like looking for people who don't have common names. Don't ask me to find John Smith. I'm in trouble, And I talked to him on the phone. As far as I know, I'm the only one who has, and you can't now because he's dead. Or at least I don't know how to do that. And I said, it sounds to me like you're saying there are 2 separate channels of communication here. He said, yes. And I said, well, suppose a saucer goes down the runway at a Strategic Air Command base where nuclear weapons are stored. I said, I presume that's a report that could affect national security. By definition, you can't have people at places where nuclear weapons are stored. On the other hand, my wife and I go down the driveway and see a saucer flying by. That's no big deal. Happens all the time. And he agreed. And this is important to Canada because Canada is joint ownership, if you will, with JNAP 146 and Air Force Manual 55-11. We have a joint Canadian-American Air Defense Command.
Okay.
And if pilots see something, there are instructions about what they should do. Now, obviously, I think reports which could affect national security are much more important to the government than ones that can't.
Right.
They finally, after much waiting, released 156 top-secret Umbra NSA UFO documents. The only trouble was that you could read one sentence per page.
Right. I saw
Everything
that.
else was whited out. You can get dozens of documents from the CIA, which are all blacked out. Sometimes you can read 6 words on a page. Wow.
Yeah, that's nuts. Well, yeah, and you know what? Since you brought up Mr. Snowden, what's your opinion on what he has to say?
Well, he hasn't said a lot about UFOs, and I can understand why he's staying out of the country, because he'd be put in a slammer immediately.
And isn't that in itself insanity? I mean, yes, I understand you know that there's the need for security, but at least some of the things he brought up really did need to come out.
Well, I'm not saying that isn't true. Look, when I was working on radiation shielding for nuclear airplanes, the guy in charge of security I think he thought we'd find a magic paint, and you wouldn't have to add any shielding. You'd just put this on the reactor, and we'd all be protected. Well, so everything was much more classified than it had to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying, everything that's classified should be classified. I am saying there is a legitimate need for security,
Definitely.
And that, for example, people pushing disclosure with a capital D don't seem to be ready to understand that if the United States government have learned important new technology from Roswell wreckage or Aztec wreckage, or maybe even from monitoring with aircraft instrumentation, new ways of detecting stuff flying in the atmosphere, why in the world should we put it on the table if the Russians and Chinese don't put what they have learned on the table? I mean, we've been playing this game of weapon, counter-weapon, counter-weapon for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there is a $1 trillion budget on the planet for things military tells you that there's a lot of investment in fancy technology to try to kill people.
Yeah, there's a lot of money to be made.
Well, and you don't talk about it.
No.
And the penalties for breaking security are pretty severe. Death, life imprisonment, stuff like that. So that's the way the world is. So I don't think everything should be disclosed. It would be nice to see a statement made by, I like to talk about 2 highly trusted individuals around the world, the Queen of England and the Pope. How's that for an odd couple? What if they were to say that we have it on good authority that the planet's being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft? They are concerned about our activities, and there are going to be international meetings over the next few months dealing with the economic, religious, philosophical, and technological aspects of this. What would happen?
Right.
I think church attendance would go up, mental hospital admissions would go up, the stock market would go down. But I think one of the key things that would happen is that the younger generation, which, unlike me, was never alive when there wasn't a space program, would immediately push for a new view of ourselves instead of as Canadians, Americans, Greeks, Peruvians, Chileans, whatever, as Earthlings.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any government on this planet, certainly not our Canadian government, that would like its citizens to owe their primary allegiance to the planet instead of that government.
Right.
Nationalism is the only game in town.
Mm-hmm.
So every government has a vested interest in staying in power. People in power want to stay in power. That goes with it's part of the game, Well, I've done a debate on UFOs that's available at my website, www.stantonfriedman.com. It's called Are Flying Saucers Real? And I did it with an Air Force, retired Air Force pilot named Magaha. at a university in Tennessee, Middle Tennessee State University, and there's a moderator. It's a 2-hour DVD, and you can decide who won.
Been great talk. Time is flying by. Okay, so make sure, people, anyone listening, go to www.stantonfriedman.com, events, to check out what's going on.
Conspiracy Factor Theory.
Secrets can be kept.
Before I got started tonight, it was pretty freaky. I went outside for a smoke, and I let it look up at the sky, and there's this, looks like a faint star, and it's incredible how clear the skies are now. It was like looking at 4K, like watching 4K on TV. And it looks really neat effect with the clouds going by. Clouds were heading from the northwest, and I see this thing that's heading northeast, coming from the west, heading northeast. So I figure it's not a plane. Obviously, this thing's pretty high. It looks like a faint star, and so I'm thinking maybe it's that. You guys know what I mean? That was it, Starlink or whatever. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, another one comes by going the same trajectory, same direction, northeast from the west. I'm like, booyah, that's kind of cool. And then I'm looking for more, see if there's another one's going to come. And then I see another star. This one's coming from the north and heading towards the south. And it was pretty high. It was definitely not a plane. None of these things I saw were planes. The first two I would concede could very well have been that Starlink dealio. But we all know that unless Elon Musk has come up with some new tech that has them going in a polar orbit, satellites do not do that. And this thing, it was booking. It had to be pretty high because it was pretty far up, very faint. It wasn't something that was low and stupidly bright that you could go, oh, that's a UFO. But like I said, I don't know anything else that does the polar orbit deal. So that was pretty mind-blowing. And it went from north to south. Where I'm looking, from Niagara Falls, well, it's St. Catharines area, towards Toronto. So I first spotted, it's over Toronto, and then within 30 seconds, it's over what would be Erie, I guess, or Chicago area. Boston, yeah. Boston's somewhere in that area. So it went pretty far, pretty quick, up pretty high. Freaked me out. Thought I would share that. I was going through some stuff the other day. If anybody out there's anything like me, when you forget things a lot, so you want to write them down. I've got all kinds of books just I'll go to the dollar store and buy a blank book to write down like phone numbers or grocery list or whatever. But most of the time I'm writing down, a thought will pop in my head for a show idea or just something I want to research. So I've got pages and pages just covered in all this stuff, and I came across one that is about 7 years old. Where was it dated here? 2013. And I must have been pretty big because I don't remember doing this thing. And what it is, about what we should do with all the money raised from pot and how to fix Canada fairly, equally for everybody. So number one I got here, increase all pensions by $500 a month. Immediately. And now I would ask that before people start going, oh, what the heck's he talking about? Bernie Sanders? Where's this money coming from? Just listen a few more before you worry about that. Man, I hate getting old. Gotta get the glasses out. Okay, number two, and here's another one that people would get angry about. Implement universal basic income of $1,200 for anyone making $90,000 a year or less immediately. All lotteries are to be run by government so that they're the ones making the profit, as well as casinos, and 50% of that money goes to unemployment benefits, as well as costs to run the basic government, like your city governments and stuff. Because we're talking a buttload of money. Think about all the money they make just from like parking meters and all the things you got to get licenses for. You got to have a fishing, like here in Canada, people go fishing, but you're supposed to have a license, and if you don't, you can get a fine. And a regular cop can just come up and give you a fine for not having a fishing license. So all the money they make off of licenses and insurance and all this stuff, it's... Alright, so what was that? Number 4, abolish eminent domain. Give a 5% tax break for incomes 100,000 to 10 million. And no breaks for people above 10 million. They just pay the regular tax rate. A 0.05% tax on all bank transactions that don't deal with public transactions. So anything business, anything a rich person's doing and the bank's making money off it, they give a 0.05%. That's it, just 0.05. And if you go on YouTube, type in the Robin Hood tax. Actually, may as well find it while I'm here. And the guy that stars in it, can't remember his name, but he plays Victor in the Underworld movies. Here we go, YouTube. I'll post it in the chat room. Robin Hood tax. Or did they take it down? Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, it's called The Banker. Alright. So copy link location. Paste. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of, I had saw that by that time, so that's probably where I was going with that. Then an immediate and 5-year retroactive 20% on all organized religion, tax-wise. They get taxed, all religions, period. If you're organized religion, boom. And retroactive, because you've been taking a free ride way too long and buying up way too much property. Number 7, more job creation by building more clean, affordable housing communities. And it's funny, you can see the back and forth in this, like kind of a hypocrite here. It's like liberal, and then Trudeau came on the scene, and I started becoming more Republican and conservative. Number 8, this one I really like. Employ all homeless at minimum wage to spend at least 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, picking up garbage. Because they've got city guys getting 2-3 times that amount of money, and they're not doing it. Let's see. Abolish all property taxes for residential citizens, except for businesses, property management companies, that kind of thing. So there's the little dealio for residential citizens. We shouldn't be... Why should you have to pay property taxes? I mean, you work all your life to buy a house, and then you got to spend the rest of your life paying taxes on the bloody thing. Number 10, replace all city trees with organic fruit trees, and use all city gardens to grow vegetables and fruit. That's obviously the liberal activist in me. Let's go. Number 11, if a company threatens to move, their Canadian accounts, properties, and holdings will be confiscated, and the company will change names and be government-owned. Kind of like what Putin threatened to do. There's a video out I had shared in one of my shows on YouTube, and there was a factory that was being shut down. A bunch of people were being held up from work, and it was a bunch of rich people holding it up. And Putin showed up, and he brings the press with him, and he's chastising these guys. He called them cockroaches. Well, he said, you scurry around like cockroaches when you find out I'm coming. And I was just like, bam! you know, and the press is there, cameras popping the whole time. Then he makes them all sign this paper. He says, if you guys don't get your shite together and get this factory back up and running and everybody back to work, I'm going to come in and we're going to do it without you. Basically saying we're going to take it over and make it national. And then he gets everybody to sign this paper, and there's this one guy, and he goes, say, I can't remember the guy's name, let's say Vlad. Hey, Vlad, I don't see your signature here. Did you sign it? Yeah, I signed it. And he goes, no, your signature's not here. So he makes the guy come up, walk over to him, gives him a pen to sign the paper, and then the guy reluctantly signed and then goes to walk away, and Putin's like, yo, get back here, give me my pen. This guy's a billionaire, tried to walk off with Putin's pen for all the press to see. That was beautiful. Like, who wouldn't want their leader to do that kind of thing, you know? That's why, like, I'm Canadian, but I love what Trump's doing. I've always liked Trump. He's a shameless but genius self-promoter. I could always see that, and that's why everybody else loved him so much and wanted him at all their parties, you know. And there's a video out on YouTube that I had done a copy of for a different show, and it is either the day of or the day after 9/11, and it's one of the networks, or maybe it was a smaller New York station, but they get Trump on the phone and they're asking him about it, and he even brings up Lucky Larry, saying how Larry is a friend of his, and he's like, you know, Larry just got this place 2 weeks ago. You can hear in his voice and the way he's describing it, he had no idea what Larry was pulling. But then he gets into how he was blown away that these planes, he sees one go through the front and come through the back, because he explains how those buildings had these thick major steel I-beams all the way around the front from the outside in, so that a plane like that would have crashed. He says he believed it was something more along the lines of a plane that had a bunch of dynamite or explosives with it, and he was one of the first ones to call on that. And then you hear these people, thank you so much, sir, Mr. Donald Trump, thank you so much. And, you know, they're just being so nice to the guy. Makes you sick to think about it. Okay, number 12. Same as above. If banks bulk, we take them and nationalize them again. And as well as any money or property owned by the owners of the bank. Because, I mean, think about it, right? What's going on with this China stuff now, too? Everybody owes China a buttload of money. I think a lot of land is owned in Canada and the U.S. by China. So now they're trying to turn this around into a way to not pay China the money we owe them, by saying, oh, you owe everybody on the planet such and such money. And you know what, even if they did that and threatened to sue and stuff and got some money out of it, it's not like any of us are ever going to see any of it, right? That's going to go towards the alleged debt. And since there's so few people that we owe money to here, like the Rothschilds and stuff, why don't we just get our law enforcement together and our military, the ones that are awake and smart to what's going on, and march on these buggers, you know, go to their mansions and, you know, scare the crap out of them at first, do the protesting. They seem to get really scared more by protesting than guns. But then if that doesn't work and they don't yield, just take it from them, right? It's ours. And so many people say, you know, basically, why doesn't Trump do something like that? And it's kind of like what Stanton was saying in that first interview. You can't just announce on the news what you're going to do to take these people down, because then the enemy hears it all too, and then they can put countermeasures into place. And what good does that do anybody? Then we're stuck in hell, you know. All right. Then number 13. All government-funded media will revamp for truth both sides of the story the way it used to be, or lose all funding and tax breaks. Here in Canada, we have the CBC, the Canadian version of the BBC, and they get money from commercials and a buttload of tax breaks and government grants. But for the most part, they've been pretty much taken over by the Liberal Party. Just like the Conservatives, though, when the Conservatives were in power, Stephen Harper was exerting his control over the CBC, and we can't have that. We shouldn't have to. I mean, it's great that we have alternative media, obviously, or I wouldn't have a place to talk myself right now, but doesn't it suck that we have to? I remember a time when you could make fun of a politician, like you could make fun of Trump and Republicans wouldn't get mad at you and want to kill you, and Democrats would find it funny. And you could make fun of Hillary and Democrats would laugh at the joke, but everybody just gets so butthurt over every little thing now. I trace it back to 2008 and 2007. That's what I was looking for when I found this list. I was trying to find some info I'd put together about CERN. Hey, sounds okay. Oh, okay, Mitchell was saying something. Actually, yeah, I like that. Just talking about CERN, okay, but we are 100% listener supported, so click the donation button if you can, or scroll down, click the Patreon button, and it'll say a Mad Painter, but that is Revolution Radio. So go ahead and donate that way, and you can rent ad space on the homepage, so contact management for that. Okay, now back to CERN. I found out about CERN after the fact, but I remember shortly after my daughter was born, she was probably about a year old. And she was born in November 2008, so we're talking 2009 even. There was a major storm. It had a lot to do with CERN, though. They had turned on, weird things started to happen, then they shut down, weird storms were happening. I'm sure a lot of you remember them. There was like severe windstorms around here, trees were being blown down and uprooted, and roofs. I worked in a greenhouse at the time, and the roof was being blown off, and this guy Bart, the lead hand there, God bless him, Dutch kid, been working in greenhouses since he was 5 or even 4, and he's up there, he climbs up the rafters, and he's trying to hold on to the corner of the roof, and it's letting go, and we're talking 90 to 100k winds, right? Like there's tornadoes and stuff going on, and even the owner comes in, Bart, let go. He finally lets go, the roof kind of takes off from there. It was like, wow. But all of that started around CERN and all this craziness where the Democrats started going nuts and liberals started going nuts, and everything was going topsy-turvy with TV shows and Trump saying, hold my beer and watch me become president. And so that all really, to me, got started back during that whole CERN debacle when they turned on and then had to shut down. And then when they restarted again, they had a ceremony outside the place. They were doing a ceremony dance routine wearing like a behemoth mask. It was insane. It was like, what the hell is this all about, guys? What are you guys really doing at CERN? And then when you read the conspiracy stuff and see that, how can you not think it's true? Even these halftime shows, they seem to be doing rituals. Lady Gaga and Katy Perry and all these. You can't even enjoy football anymore. Okay, back to the list quickly. There's only a couple more here. Rather than just flat out politicians, because they're money grubbing, and you can't have rich people doing it. You just have a group of elders. You choose people that everybody can trust, that are, you interview people, find out who's got a good head on their shoulders, who seems genuine. And then even then, they don't get complete power if it seems like they're doing something to screw with the rest of the people. They get put down too. 16. People in positions of power who abuse said power and cause harm to others will be fired immediately without pay. Depending on the severity of the crime, they will be put to death if guilt is proven. And that's the best way, in my estimation, to get rid of crooked politicians. You take down a few of them and watch them all fall in line. And you severely limit the amount of money they are allowed to make every year. Term limits, people. We need term limits. Look what we're going through with like Schumer and Pelosi. And these people have been in there for at least 40 years already. And they've done nothing to earn the money they've made. And a lot of people will say, let's stop paying them for now and see how they like it. Guess what? They don't care. They're corrupt. They've been bought out. They're worth millions and hundreds of millions already. All right, that's the break. Be back on the other side.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Hello, Karl Marx here. Look at my wonderful hair. Notice how I sweep it back.
Karl?
I call it the 360 sweep. Beard, sideburns, and the magnificent coif.
Karl!
What? What is this?
You're on the radio. They can't see you.
Oh, yeah, I get confused.
Want to learn more about the Marxist agenda and other important stuff? Listen to The Ultimate Remedy with L.B. Bork, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Revolution Radio.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love, and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right, Factor Theory Live. I'm Steve Crawford. Let's check out the chat room for a minute, see how everybody's doing. Pretty sure most people are in B by now because my sound went to crap for quite a while there. Alright, visit list. Anybody who is listening, you want to go into the chat room, go to freedomslips.com and sign yourself in. You don't have to set up an account, and you can go in, and a lot of people share some great posts. The hosts share stuff as they're doing their shows. Right now in there we got Wally and Ahmad, and Basement 5, Mitchell, Captain Kirk, Keith, Lioness, Blasphemous Buddha, SJ, Comet, Alaska Man, Stardust Man, Cat Dog Girl, Monster 383, Mr. Rowe, Gino 2017, Death Star, Third Engineer, Omega Logos, Popsicle Toes, Pat Rabbit, hey buddy, Crab Cake, May Street 139, Batsman, Jer Bear, me, and Suri Sunflower. Back to chat. Alright, so there was nothing new there. Now, okay, so there was stuff also in this. Let me change that. In this book, I had many random words written for things I wanted to check out down the road, and oh, wrong thing. One of them was this. Come on. Project Sidekick. That is it. So I don't know how many of you people out there watched any of the Avenger movies and Captain America and all of that. But in the last couple movies, they started using a technology that was like 3D. They were talking to somebody, but there was a 3D image of the person in front of them. Much like they've been showing these, you see Iron Man, he brings up his phone and taps it and everything appears in the air. It's something like that, but it's a 3D representation of the person that they're talking to. And Project Sidekick is a real thing that was developed to do just that as part of a holographic Skype application. So if you go to Wikipedia, you type in Project Sidekick, and the functionality says Sidekick has two modes of operation. Remote Expert Mode uses the functionality of the holographic Skype application, voice and video chat, real-time virtual annotation, to allow a ground operator and space crew member to collaborate directly over what the astronaut sees, with a ground operator able to see the crew member's view in 3D. Oh, okay, they're able to see what the crew guy's able to see, but in 3D. That is mind-blowing. Been seeing it in the movies, and I suspected they've had something like that, and if it's actually in Wikipedia now, they've probably had it at least 10 years. Okay, so let's go It provides interactive guidance and draw annotations in the crew member's environment. In procedure mode, animated virtual illustrations display on top of objects as a crew member interacts with them. So that kind of sounds like there's a scene where Tony Stark's doing this little, I guess you'd call it like a little holodeck, and there's objects in there, and he had 3D stuff printed over top of it of his mother and his father. And so if you watch the movies, that's what they're talking about here. Where did I leave off? The crew member interacts with and standalone scenario. Applications include inventory management, in which the system recognizes the inventory item and can display a path to where the item should be stored. Previously, crew members would rely primarily on printed instructions and voice-based communication when performing complex tasks. The capabilities provided by Sidekick have been promoted as potential enabling features, allowing for reduced crew training requirements and increased efficiency in deep space missions, in which communication delays can complicate difficult operations. The history: after having performed simulated reduced gravity testing in its weightless Wonder C9 aircraft, we could get into that thing as to where they do a lot of the filming for the ISS as well. NASA attempted to launch a pair of HoloLens units aboard SpaceX CRS-7. Aboard the SpaceX CRS-7 launched to the International Space Station on June 28, 2015. But the Falcon 9 rocket carrying the payload exploded at 2 minutes and 19 seconds into the flight. I remember that. Sidekick was tested at the Aquarius Laboratory from late July to early August in 2015 as part of a 2-week-long NASA Extreme Environment Missions operation. Demonstrating its operation in tasks such as equipment checks and setup, HoloLens hardware was successfully delivered to the ISS in the Cygnus CR7 or CRS OA-4 commercial resupply mission on December 9th, 2015. So they did get it up there after the first one exploded. I wonder how much money they wasted on that. So that sounds like there's something they're putting in for like the military and NASA now. So that's probably going to be at least another 5 to 10 years before there's any practical application for the general public. Now, there was another thing. Oh yeah, there was the other day, Dr. Lorraine Day. Check her out. Go to her website. I think she was on with Dr. Fetzer, but wow, that woman was a pistol. Check her out as soon as you get a chance. Okay, yeah, somebody had asked me a question and actually brought up a good point earlier on my Facebook. They're wondering if they think, because the Dems are starting to lose it. If Trump and Q are right, the Dems are starting to lose it, and they have to start at the bottom and work their way up and get all the people at the bottom that are protecting the people up top and stopping anybody from doing any kind of serious investigation or arrest on any of these deep state members. So yeah, there it is. Okay, lost my place there. And he asked me if you think there's any chance that while the Dems are still in charge somewhat, with all of their minions at least, in police and mayor's offices and lawyers and judges, you think they may try to have the police attack the public in a last-ditch effort to get the public to start a war so they can, publicly announce the lockdown and really start beating people with bats and pulling another Kent State, but on a nationwide scale. And that kind of freaked me out. I was like, man, that hadn't even crossed my mind at that point. And you never know with these freaks, right? Look at everything they're actually pulling and saying and getting away with. They're the ones holding everything up. And yet they're giving everyone the impression that it's all Trump's fault. And I had seen earlier, there was this guy, and I got to start writing down these people's names, but he did a post about a press conference Trump did, and I'm not sure if it was today or yesterday, but it was fantastic. He brought out a TV and a video. He had either he had somebody in his cabinet throw together, or somebody just threw together because they were sick of all the bullshit coming from the press. They try to say he waited too long to do anything, and they've even got people that were Trump fans that still are to some degree, but questioning him and going, yeah, he waited too long and stuff. No, you got to remember, he didn't. And in this video, he shows it beautifully, and he displays it in front of the press corps, or who was there from the press corps. And it starts out with how they're saying he didn't do anything, he waited too long, and then it shows a video of March, like say March 10th. I can't remember the exact date, but let's say it was March 10th, and then it'll bring up the video of him shutting down, saying that he's stopping planes from coming in. And that was pretty early, man, because everybody got mad at him, and they lost their shite and started calling him xenophobic and racist and everything. Remember that, people? Everybody went nuts when he started shutting down the planes. He did that early, and after that, then he shows a video of Nancy Pelosi in Chinatown after this coronavirus has been announced, and she's going, no, it's all okay, everybody come to Chinatown. Then it shows clips of the press saying all the things that they're saying he's not allowed to say, like calling it a Chinese virus and stuff like that. And he's got all the clips of CNN and all these stations doing it. And then when he's done playing it, one guy, one of the butthurt guys, I believe he was from ABC, he speaks up and he's like, who produced that? Who paid for that production? Thinking he's going to nail them for spending taxpayer money. And he's like, well, somebody here made it in like 2 hours. It's like, yeah, dude, you're a journalist and you don't know that people at home can make a video in an hour on their own computer and upload them on YouTube? What do you think YouTube is, dude? And then when he realized that was a stupid question, he's like, well, why did you do that? He's all offended. All he did was show the truth. Oh, the one thing that really got them butthurt is there was a woman from the New York Times, and they played a clip of her talking about how everybody was treating him crappy and how he had actually done this and that, and they were just losing it. It was funny. Oh, man. So you just got to remember that, too. You can't just go after these people, because if you start doing that right away, they lawyer up, they start, doing the death by suicide body counts of Hillary Clinton and such. They want to make sure they can stop these people from doing it. That's it, period. They want to stop them, and you can't do that if you announce your plans on the news. I'd be curious if anybody out there's a show called The Man in the High Castle, and I found it on Prime, and luckily it had already been out for a few years, so there was a few seasons to watch, and it was really neat. It was what would happen if the Nazis had won World War II. For those who haven't seen it, and in this parallel Earth, it's the Nazis and Japan that won, and America is gone. It's taken over by the Nazis. They're destroying things like the Statue of Liberty and stuff. And I'm trying to figure out how they come up with the name, the Man in the High Castle. But so anyway, there's this little underground thing going on, and it has something to do with a film. And then you find out that later that this film shows the Americans winning World War II, and everybody's going nuts on the underground trying to get the scene as the Nazis and the Japanese are trying to stop people and killing people from seeing it. If you have not seen that and you've got Prime, check it out. Okay, so this is a exopolitics.org with Michael Sala, his site. Man in the High Castle is soft disclosure of temporal war revealed in Cosmic Secret. And I mean, at this point, we can't disprove that, can we? It is a definite possibility. So this one was actually written by Michael. There's other contributors from time to time. So he says, I just finished watching the season finale of Amazon's The Man in the High Castle, and was stunned to see how increasingly focused on the idea of a temporal war. How increasingly focused on the idea of a temporal war, which has been the subject of 2 of my recent articles on the QAnon movement and the deep state. The 4th season's release, November 15th, was followed 4 days later by the release of The Cosmic Secret, where interviewees discussed the temporal war idea and further revealed the long history of extraterrestrial colonization on Earth and the secret space programs currently underway. In the Amazon series, an adaptation of Philip K. Dick's 1962 short story of the same name. Okay, so that's where it came from, 1962, but I guess I would have to read the books to figure out where they came up with that name, because it doesn't seem to be in the show. But anyway, we were witness to a dystopian parallel reality where Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan won World War II, and they occupied the United States, dividing it into 3 zones. The largest is a Nazi-occupied zone on the East Coast. The next largest is Japanese-occupied West Coast. And the smallest zone is a buffer area in between them called the Neutral Zone, which is dominated by members of a resistance movement. In the first 3 seasons, the plot revolves around a mysterious set of film reels showing our timeline, reality. Is it though, reality? Anyway, where Nazi Germany and Japan are defeated. The contraband films give Americans in the dystopian parallel reality hope as they witness their oppressors losing the war and being tried for their crimes. It's kind of mind-bending to think about this stuff. What a great show this was too. Seriously, check it out. The American resistance movement spends much time duplicating and distributing the films in the first 3 seasons and are predictably hunted down and killed for their efforts. At the end of season 3, the plot evolves to where Nazis have now developed a portal travel machine, aka time machine, which they plan to send temporal agents into our timeline to first spy and then change it so the Nazis can take over. The portal time travel machine is located at a powerful geomagnetic anomaly located in the old mine tunnel in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, and we witness prisoners dying horribly in the initial experiments, which echoes what happened in the Montauk Project from 1970 to 1983. I have got to email him, but I am going to be talking with Stuart Swerdlow very soon, because eventually this lockdown, people are going to get sick of it, and I'd like to talk to him before the revolution.
just in case I don't survive it and I can pop this up on YouTube for posterity's sake. Okay, so The Man in the High Castle is a very popular drama series whose pilot episode set Amazon's viewing records. So it's one of the shows that helped make Amazon what it is today. Most importantly, the series appears to be a soft disclosure of a temporal war that is happening right now. In parts 1 and 2 in this article series, he covered the portal time travel technology respectively used by the Deep State and U.S. military intelligence /Q in a temporal war. The idea of Nazi temporal agents coming into our reality to spy and change it is countered by people in dystopian reality being able to visit our reality through spontaneous consciousness shifts and thereby offsetting the efforts of the Nazi temporal agents. Yeah, it starts to expand beyond just this machine. And that certain awake people are actually able to close their eyes and focus and transport themselves physically to our reality. And it kind of makes you wonder what would happen to your doppelganger. Do they disappear to your reality? And I think that's where they were going with this TV show. That in this show anyway, that's what happened. Okay, in the final episodes of the series, the Japanese occupation of the Pacific States eventually fail, and the Nazi effort to take over the Pacific States collapses after the defection of high-level U.S. military officials. The final scene shows how the Nazi temporal war is over, and thousands of temporal refugees start pouring through the Nazi portal to a new life on Earth. The key question that arises is whether the series is based on facts. Is a parallel Nazi civilization trying to change our timeline? That's a head scratcher because it could very well be so. Okay, in the series, the Nazis... I did leave off there. So, in the series, the Nazis are depicted as occupying a dystopian parallel reality using a portal to affect changes in other timelines. In our reality, however, as he has shown in Antarctica's Hidden History, I believe that's one of his books, check those out on Amazon as well, a group of German nationalists and Nazis established a breakaway colony in Antarctica during World War II. This colony is significantly expanded with bases on the Moon and Mars, and exerts I guess I need to upgrade my glasses now too. A powerful influence over even beyond our solar system, as it explained in part 2 of the Temporal War article series. Put simply, Nazi German agents are trying to change our timeline from their ancient bases in Antarctica, the Moon, and Mars. Now, we know the Nazis all went down there just before the war. Not all of them, obviously, but a buttload of them got on the New Schwabenland and others, and their U-boats, and they established a base. It makes you wonder if at that point in time they had a Project Looking Glass or something, a two-way dimensional communication system set up with their Nazi counterparts to tell them how to play the long game here in this reality. Maybe they're hearing from another losing Nazi reality who went down to Antarctica just like our guys did, but got farther faster with the technology and sent messages to help our guys and then explain to them that, yeah, play the long game. And then again, these days, man, I really do not know what to think about the Holocaust. All the facts that I have researched and that other people more learned than myself have researched, and that even Jewish researchers like David Cole has put together videos with Auschwitz survivors, and he went to Auschwitz and did a tour, and he went into, during the tour, he would ask normal questions. He let them know he was doing a documentary, and he had a camera guy there. But he let her take the normal tour, and they got into the room that was the alleged gas chamber. And there were doors on it. There was the lid on the top that they alleged that they would open up to drop in the cyclone gas and then close it. But you could tell that this room, there was plumbing. It was a bathroom or a shower with a toilet at one point. It had a door, and he asked, "Are these the original doors?" And she said yes. And this door was like an old-time office door with a gap underneath it, a gap at the top, and a glass window pane on the top half of it. So, but he didn't say this to her, of course, and he was asking his questions, and then he would later, over top of the video, edit in his other things, and then he's interviewing Auschwitz survivors, and there's this one woman who is talking about how she worked with the kids a lot, and they had drama, and they had a theater, and they put on plays. They had a stage and a grand piano, not just a piano, a grand piano, and they were treated well. They had food. She even got all giddy remembering she was given an assignment to do something for the Germans as a job, a chore at the camp, and she was all giddy because she got to talk to a handsome German soldier, and she was talking about how they had given them, they were putting up curtains for them, and I'm just, my mind is racing, and I'm starting to get angry because I believed all the 6 million crap. And then there was other evidence that had come out stating that originally the Red Cross, the numbers the Red Cross had come up with for the amount of people, just people in general, that were killed in these camps by the hands of a German, a Nazi, outright murder, were much, much lower than 6 million. There were more like a couple 100,000, and only about 140,000 approximately were actually Jews at the time. And there's so many that would have the tattoos as well, that would have 5 digits. And they all seemed, there was another man, he was talking about how they had money, and they had a canteen where they could go in and buy stuff, and they were able to mail letters to their friends, and their friends could bring them stuff and put money in their camp wallets for them. Huh? And then another guy was talking about how they had soccer teams, and they would play with other camps and stuff, and that there was, every once in a while, the German officers would want to play with them, and they would join in and play. There was nothing being said about the horrors that were described. Now, there, of course, a lot of people died back then, but that was typhus. The Zyklon Z, or whatever it was used to kill that off. When you go to Auschwitz, and now I'm just playing devil's advocate, of course it could have happened. I don't know what to believe these days. That's my point. I'm on the fence about everything. I just know that it's pretty suspect that the Jews seem to be the heroes of the Bible, the heroes and the victims, and it was written by Jews, and it says they're God's chosen. That just seems pretty convenient to me. And when you hear these people did not go through what they went through, and David Cole was proving all this stuff, and I had posted a video about it, and YouTube had taken it down. It had upwards of 100,000 views, and it was removed for going against community guidelines. And the fact of the matter is, it was all over the place. I copied it from somebody who had posted it on Facebook, and their post was still up, and I searched it out on YouTube, and other people's posts were still up, and they had anywhere from 5,000 to a couple 100,000 views. Theirs were still up there. They had commercials on theirs, but I was being shut down for whatever reason. And that guy from Q was telling me, if you want to be heard and fly under the radar, do your thing, but do not talk about the Jews or Zionism. I kind of can't help it, because their hand is in what's going on as well these days. They have the contracts to a lot of the security and communications that are going on, and all the stuff that the NSA is getting, they get too. Okay, sorry. So back to the article. Left off talking about how it's possible that the Germans went down there and they were in touch with their other selves from a different world, whether it be one. I guess it would make more sense that it would be one that did win, and they were trying to tell these guys how to win given their current circumstances, and they played the long game. But where I was going with that is, I don't know what to believe when it comes to Hitler, because look, Stalin killed a hell of a lot more people than Hitler. 25 million. Okay? So why are we not talking about him? Well, wasn't Stalin Jewish? I'm pretty sure if you check out his lineage, he was Jewish. He came in as soon as they killed off the Romanovs. They hired mercenaries to come in and kill off the Romanovs and all 25 million of their own citizens overall. But it's always about Hitler, so I want to know, was this guy a lunatic? Now, eventually, I believe he did become one, because these guys were all on meth, too. That's what Blitzkrieg was all about. They created meth and gave it to their guys, and that's why the tank riders, they were gone like bats out of hell, man. They took off, and they would stay for a little bit. They would wait until they saw a few soldiers, the ground troops, starting to show up, and then they took off again and went to the next town, and they were spreading their communications lines really thin. But they were able to do this because they were all hopped up on meth. They weren't sleeping. They were up for like a week. And eventually Hitler was taking the same stuff. So that's got to mess with your train of thought. But once again, now I go back to now all the people going, oh, he's anti-Semitic or whatever, and he's a Hitler fan. No, once again, I'm back on the fence, because I know what William Casey said. When everything Americans believe is false, we'll know that our program is complete. So once again, I said everything, not some things. The things that are being pushed the most, and what is it? It's Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. Not even just Trump. Well, they were calling him Hitler too, and you and me. If we try to speak up, they call you Hitler these days. That's the big Democrat go-to. You're racist and you're Hitler. So it makes me scratch my head when it comes to that whole thing. Now, of course, I'm certain there were some Nazi officers that bought into that whole crap. But out of them, it was the U-boat captains. They were not allowed to have any political affiliations. And whenever possible, when they sunk a ship, if there was no need to kill them, they didn't, and they would even, give them like life jackets and food or whatever, and hang out in the area until somebody was getting close. They'd seen them on radio. They would stick around and help them. Those guys had honor, and you can go to I think it's sharkhunters.com, and there's great information on that. It's actually how I helped there was a band here in Canada called Harem Scarum. If you get the chance, look them up on YouTube. Fantastic songs. Fantastic guys. They're great guys. And they sound just as good live as they do in the studio. And there was always something that looked very familiar about the singer to me, and his name is Harry Hess. Yes, Hess. And I thought he may be a direct descendant of Rudolf Hess. And I got a picture of them both, put it together, and they both have the bushy eyebrows, similar eyes. There's enough that you could say, yeah, they could be family. Maybe Rudolph was his great-great-uncle or something like that. And then I was watching a show on TubiTV.com. That's a good site for people who don't have the money for Netflix and stuff. Go to Tubi, it's free. And so I was watching the Shark Hunters, and he was talking about the U-boat commanders and how they had honor. And a lot of the people that are in Shark Hunters, they were Navy and Marines on these ships and in the submarines, but they're also German guys. These guys are all friends now, and they also share a lot of the same conspiracies. And they were showing pictures, and they were talking about the names of some of these U-boat captains, and the one picture came up, and I spit out my beer and I hit pause, because it was a picture of the guy's name was Hans-Georg Hess, Hess, and it was the spitting image of this guy, Harry Hess, from the band Harem Scarum. And you guys can look this up yourself. I believe the video is still on YouTube, and I think it was either Nazis and UFOs or Did Hitler Escape the War? You go to the documentaries on Tubi, and it's in there. But this picture looked like a spitting image of him, so much so that it could have been that, like, say they were filming a World War II movie and they were looking for someone to play a German U-boat captain. They could have hired Harry, and he could be wearing period dress, and it would be the spitting image. It could be his father. It looked that much like twin brother. I lost it. And he was saying how there were a lot of ships, subs, after the war, as part of Operation Paperclip, that were distributed by the captured Nazis and stuff, and as part of the deal, some of them were allowed to relocate, obviously, through Operation Paperclip. Some went to Britain, some were in Germany, some came to Canada, and some went to the States, obviously. And this guy came to Canada, and they were given even some money and land and stuff, because there's a place in Toronto, or just outside of it, called Hess Village, even. And I just lost my mind, and I had brought it up innocently to Harry, because he was going to be on my show. I was going to interview him. I had interviewed the drummer, Darren James Smith. For anybody who's an Ozzy fan, you will remember Jakey Lee. Jake disappeared for a long time after Ozzy. He had his own band. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. Ray Gillen was the singer. Kiss drummer Eric was the drummer. But after that band, he went away for a while. And then he came back, and he was looking for a new singer. And Darren, the drummer from Harem Scarum, actually auditioned and got the gig. So he's now singing with a band called Red Dragon Cartel. They've got some great songs up too. Buy an album if you can, or check them out on YouTube. RedDragonCartel.com. And so I got a hold of Harry, and I was going to do an interview with him, and I was telling him, hey, dude, I just found out some stuff about your family. I don't know if you know it or not. And I told him about the show and where to go at what time to scroll to and hit play from about the picture. And he may have done it because, well, he got the message. You know how when you send a message to someone on Facebook and then their picture pops up under it once they've seen it, or sometimes it even says seen. So he saw the message. So I'm thinking he took a look at it, and he must have realized how much, if he didn't already know about Hans-Gerich Hess, he did at this point, and how much the guy looked like him. And he never got back to me after that, so I didn't get to do my interview. I was going to be interviewing his guitarist, Pete L'Esperance. The guy is the lord of the guitar face. Seriously, do yourselves a favor, go on YouTube, type in Harem Scarum, No Justice, and look for the official video, and just watch, listen to the guitar solo, listen to this guy's playing, and watch, he's doing this solo one-handed, and watch the faces this guy makes. Now, we have different political views. He's a card-carrying liberal, and I don't care, to each their own. I agree to disagree, but I guess he decided to take a look. He was smart. Took a look at some of my shows first and sent me a message. At least a lot of people don't even get back to me. I guess they look at my shows, and the old ones I did a lot of swearing. I know the hell you say, Steve. You swear? Oh yeah. I don't know if Mechanic's listening, but he's been to my YouTube page, and I'm sure he's seen some of them, and he can confirm it. But now he's with Jake. That's Darren, that is. And I wound up tracking this guy just by watching documentaries, man. I was bored. I have a back injury, so I can't even sing in bands anymore. For anyone who doesn't know, I was a singer-songwriter. I was offered a record deal, but the record company thought they were talking to me. They were actually talking to my bass player, who was overweight. All the guys in the band were overweight at the time. I was a little overweight at the time too, but I was in the type of shape that 2 months of working out, I would look fine. Plus, I had a voice at that point in time, and they wanted me because of my voice. This guy didn't tell me about it. He literally he told us that we were offered a distribution deal, knowing that I would outright say, F that, we need money to record. And then he told us about a Japanese company that wanted us, but we'd have to do some talking to figure out how much they could give us. And I left it with him, and then the next thing I know, he was supposed to be the best man at my wedding, even. So it's my wedding day. He's not showing up. I'm like, I had to get my brother to stand up for me. And I call his brother afterwards, and I ask him what's going on, and he tells me, oh, didn't you hear? I want to say his name. Buddy packed up, and he moved to the Philippines. He found a girl online there, and they're going to get married. I'm like, what are you talking about, right? So it was years after this. He tells me, we're doing, I don't know if you guys down in the States, how many of you heard of the band Saga? Their hit song was On the Loose. No one can stop us now. Tonight we're on the loose. That band, if you know the song. And we were doing a little mini tour with them. My buddy was the guitar tech, and I was selling merch for the guys. So after the shows, we'd all get together and party. These guys were all chronic pot smokers, and funny as hell to party with. And so they're all in a room, we're all partying. We get very lit, and the guys all leave, getting to the point where we're just about to get ready to go to bed, and this guy starts crying because he's seeing at this point that I'm I'm born for this, right? I'm living my dream. I was meant to be on the road going from hotel room to hotel room with a band. So he starts crying and he admits to me about how these guys at, it was called Paris Records, apparently the band Helix is with them, and they wanted me but not the band. And I was stupid at that point, and I forgave him. I was like, well, you're not going to screw me over again, right? No, I promise. Then I was going to do a ghost hunting show, and my ex and I were breaking up. I got hurt at work, messed up my back. Her and her family thought I was faking, and I had lost my band, lost everything. Decided I was going to do the other thing I was good at, because I'm an empath and ghosts just come to me. When I turn on a recorder, if there is a ghost around, I'm going to hear them. They show up on that tape. And I was getting a lot of stuff from my father-in-law. So anyway, I got this guy involved, and he helped me put a song together. I wrote some lyrics, and he was putting the music together. And I had brought up, there's this band called Slick Toxic, and I was friends with the singer, Nick Walsh, at the time. And my ex was a total groupie. She loved all those bands. She would go to all their shows. So I was like, man, actually, I can hear Nick singing on this song, and she laughs in my face. There's no way he'd even give you the time of day. So I look at her, and I go, really? So I send him a message. Like he said, he was a friend of mine at the time. He was on my Facebook. I sent him a message. 20 seconds after I sent it, probably the amount of time it took to read it, he's sending back a message. Yeah, man, sounds awesome. Let me know when you're ready. And I show it to her, and she's like, huh? So anyway, the long and short of it was, I was giving this guy another chance. I brought him in on it. I even got the band Helix involved. He had never met the guys before. So there's the singer, Brian Vollmer, he wasn't involved, but Daryl Gray and I were good friends at the time, and I lost him as a friend over this because of this guy. So Daryl was involved. Their newest guitarist, who replaced Paul after Paul died. Paul was a sweetheart. Check out Helix too. You want to see a great video for the way 80s rock was. A great performance video. Look at Wild in the Streets by Helix, the official video. And buy an album. Or at least download a single. So I had the guitarist who replaced the guy from that video that I just told you to go check out. And the other guitarist, Brent, great guy, and he's into video editing himself, and he's a big fan of Stanton Friedman and ghost hunting and all that stuff, so he was right down with it. And then Daryl was involved as well, Daryl Gray. And I had told my buddy, no matter what, because I'm the one arranging it all, putting it all together, and liaising between everybody. And these guys are like rock star guys who don't have day jobs. They also do gigs at night. So if they're going to go ghost hunting with us, they're going to have to cancel a gig. So if they do, make sure you show up. Well, this guy was blowing it off. And the worst part about it was he wasn't calling us to cancel. So I couldn't even give these guys a heads up. And predictably, the guys from Helix start bitching me out. So then I get mad, and this Dean guy, he even chimes in and goes, yeah, Steve, what's that all about? This guy's the one who held us all up and canceled without telling everybody. So I lost my shite, and I start freaking out. And while I'm freaking out, this guy starts messaging the guys from Helix behind my back, yeah, Steve's going to cut us all out and take everything for himself and blah, blah, blah. So they decide to listen to him. I had gotten into how, look, this guy had just admitted to me how he had ripped me off from a record deal, and that you can't trust him, you can't believe him, and now he's messing with the show. They chose to trust him over me after being my friend. Then they were all going to do this ghost hunting detective show together, and Canadian Ghost Detectives it was going to be called, and that fell apart right quick. I lost 3 good friends because of this guy, all because I try to see the best in people and give them second chances. So that's kind of how I got into it. I had to stop performing live because I couldn't stand, and I couldn't perform, run around and put on a show or anything. And because of all the head injuries I had, I was having a hard time remembering lyrics. So I had to have a music stand. And some people were prissy about that. They didn't want, oh, you should remember all the lyrics. I'm like, well, let's see how much you remember after having your head slammed in 5 or 6 times. But that combined with the back injury that I just couldn't do anymore, so I figured I'd get into ghost hunting. And then this guy screws up my ghost hunting show. So then another guy's like, you know what, Steve, you're into this conspiracy stuff, and the way it's going, you'd probably have a better chance of being able to do something UFO-wise. And this was back at this time, I was looking for a career. I wanted to be the guy who wanted to be famous. It wasn't so much fame. I wanted to be known just enough to be able to make a living. I don't care about being rich, but yeah, I was in it for money. And I did not get the chance. Things fell apart with my ex again. She got together with this guy that was, and you got to be very careful. This is for fathers who are going through or about to go through breakups and custody issues. I want you to be very, very careful about what you sign. You take a very good look and you make sure that everything you want is there in print. And you even make sure when it lists your rights and responsibilities, the things that you have to do. The reason I was ultimately able to win and get my daughter back into my life is because just before my rights and responsibilities, it says including but not limited to, which essentially means that I'm not beholden to any of those listed rights and responsibilities. I could call my ex and say, I want to take my daughter for, I don't know, a week, especially now, right? Given there's a lockdown. If I want to take her for a week, I can. And she's got no good reason to say no. So you really got to watch to make sure you don't get ripped, because I was stupid and I decided to trust in the system. And now she got to the courthouse just before me. Now, here in Canada, if you can't afford a lawyer, you can go to what's called legal aid, and you'll get a lawyer that will, for free, but they don't actively pursue your best interests. They really don't. They just try to get you the basic and do the minimum work they can, because they're just getting a set fee for doing it. She got there first. She was employed. I was not. I was awaiting disability. I was stuck on welfare, and at that point here in Canada, welfare was about $560 a month, and my rent, I lived in a tiny shithole apartment. It was not even a 1-bedroom. You couldn't even really call it a bachelor. The bedroom, there was enough room for a futon folded out, and it touched from wall to wall. It touched both walls. So I had room for that and like a TV and my computer. And that was $400 a month. And then your internet, entertainment, phone, there's another $120. That leaves you, what, $40 a month for food? So it's not a prize, trust me. I would much rather be working than anything else. So you make sure, because this guy, we sat down in the office and it was like five minutes before 5 o'clock on a Friday. We were at the courthouse for 1, and he held us off till the end of the day. And I told him everything I wanted. She said everything she wanted. We agreed. He went and put it on paper for the first draft. I looked at it all, agreed. We both signed it. Then he went to make the second draft, the final draft. Did a quick glance. Like I said, it was 5 to 5 at the end of the day. If I didn't sign that paper at that time, I was going to have to wait 1 more week to see my daughter. So I took a quick glance, seeing Yes, my visitations. Yes, my weekends, my nightly phone calls. Yes, I get shared responsibilities. Okay, fantastic. One of the things she was supposed to do is she was going to be moving to Hamilton, which is 40 minutes away from me. And like I said, I was on welfare. I did not have a car. She was supposed to be, and she did. She was supposed to be responsible for transportation. This guy took it out of the paperwork at the last minute, knowing I did a quick glance. So then when it came time for her to come pick up my daughter from a visit, she decided to do it early during my week-long summer visitation. And she told me, oh, you know, I can do this and I don't have to bring her if I don't want to. So I looked it up and I was like, okay, well, technically I have her for 2 more days. She called in the police. She gets out of the car. She's, oh, I'm in fear for my life. And then immediately starts ranting and freaking out and calling me a bun. And I've got a camera going. I've got my audio recorder going. The police are watching. They see that I'm filming, recording everything. And she's doing this on the street in front of all the neighbors. So that's when I decided, okay, something's got to be done. Well, actually, they screwed me for 2 years. It took 2 years for me to finally figure out and do enough research to check it out and to find that part that said including but not limited to. Sorry, I'm stammering here. It's 11:57 and I'm expecting that final bumper to start any minute. So in conclusion, for fathers, make sure you check out your local rights extensively. Type in a specific question on Google. What does a father, what are my rights as a father in Indiana, in Illinois, or wherever? And you will get a specific answer, and then follow it up. Then look up Royal Admiralty, Maritime Admiralty Law, Law of the Land, Law of the Sea, Cemetery Law, Rule of Law, all of these things. And look for the things that can tie into your local laws, and be prepared. Have things in point form. So if you do get a lawyer, tell the lawyer, I've looked up this, this, and this. I want you to base our case on this. Here's a list of the things I want. Make it happen. And you go in prepared. That's what you need. You need to be able to floor these lawyers. She got the lawyer before me, but as soon as we sat down in front of a judge, I got to talk first. And when the judge found out that I had been kept from my daughter, and she even stopped me from calling her. When I told her this guy grabbed my daughter's butt on the phone while I was talking to her. She was 3 years old. Of course, red flags went up. So I lost my mind, and I told my ex, I don't want him around my daughter. Tell him to keep his hands off her. She cut me off. As soon as the judge found that out, he started giving me everything. Well, okay, his stuff is his visitation immediately reinstated, weekends reinstated, phone calls reinstated. And he's like, oh, but Your Honor, we haven't even gotten into this and whatever. So that's all he had to do was tell the truth. The judge asked me what happened. I told him, and he's like, oh, really? And he got mad. And this happened at Christmas. They shut me down at Christmas time from seeing my daughter. So really, guys, fight for your kids, because they deserve it, and so do you. Too many people commit suicide every year, these fathers, because they don't know what to look for. They're told that the woman has all the rights. That shite's changing now. Judges are starting to lock up women who aren't paying, who are taking money from the fathers, bankrupting them, but still not letting them see their kids. Okay, it's 12 o'clock. They got to be kicking in now. Have a great day. Take care. Factor Theory Live.